Greetings, fellow Earthlings. I love these things, man. If I can get it open. Chocolate. They're the greatest, man. I love cupcakes. So good. So good. Yeah, these are the chocolate ones. But I like just about every variety of cupcake. Strawberry, vanilla. These are the store-bought ones, Hostess. But I love the fresh baked ones. Mom used to make sometimes. There's only one kind of cupcake I don't like, and that is cupcakes that lie. And if you don't know yet, when I talk about a lying cupcake, I'm of course talking about Matt Powell. And I know you're watching, Matt. Maybe not live, but you'll see this in the future. I mean, you've been stalking Nakasuchi for months, showing up in his live chats, spewing your homophobia and other hatred, putting comments under his videos. And I want to say what I'm about to say is my opinion only. I haven't talked to Knock about this or any of the other panelists here tonight. So it's my opinion only. So hold me responsible for what's about to come out of my face hole. Matt Powell, you are a liar. I claim that as knowledge. I know that you are a liar. You were on a Kent Hovind stream the other day. And by the way, you and Kent were made for each other. Now, you are guilty of a few different kinds of lies. You're an outright liar. And you also commit lies of omission. Now, as far as your outright lies, you said in the stream, the aforementioned stream on Kent Hovind's channel the other day, that after your debate with Nakasuchi on Modern Day Debate, that the atheist community had disowned Nakasuchi. There's a couple things wrong with that. One, atheists are not part of some homogenous group that's in lockstep with the same ideology. Despite what you seem to claim often, Richard Dawkins isn't our pope. We don't all agree with them. Certainly atheists, they belong to different groups and different cliques and whatever, but we're not all part of the same group. We don't all believe in the same ideologies. And after that debate with Nakasuchi, actually, many people in the atheist community reached out to Nakasuchi to show their support, to help him to better understand what he had done wrong and what he had done right in his interaction with you. And what you did is you took one comment by Aaron Ra and somehow you translate that into an entire community has disowned an individual. So that's outright lie number one. The other outright lie that you've told, Matt, is that Nakasuchi pursued you, that he engaged you to begin with, that that he bugged you until you agreed to have a debate with him. Not true. You've been showing up in his comment sections and in his live chat for months and months and months, spewing your hatred, trolling, so you're the one that initiated contact, without a doubt. And the lies of omission that you've told is in the way you edit your interactions with people. You did it in the little video you showed on Kent's stream the other day. You've done it many times in the past. Now, you might rationalize that by saying that, well, that's just creative editing. No, it's called a lie of omission. You are omitting certain facts. You are omitting certain statements that people made to further your narrative. So you can't say that it's not a lie. It is a lie. When you omit facts to paint a certain narrative, that is a lie of omission. So that's basically all I wanted to say to start out with. Again, this is my opinion. Haven't talked to Doc about this. You'd have to talk to him about his opinion. It's not the opinion of anybody that's joining me tonight. And we won't be discussing this at all tonight. We have another topic, as was put in the title, that we will talk about. And I just want to say, Matt, my name is John Petersen, E-N at the end of Petersen. I don't normally interject myself into the community dramas, but I had to say something today because you went after my brother, Nakasuchi, and you lied on him. And it's not the first time you've done it. So remember my name, and if I'm wrong, show me that I'm wrong, and I'll admit that. And not only that, but if I'm wrong, I have just slandered you in live broadcast. I challenge you to come after me in civil court if you feel as if I slandered you. So that's the end of that. One more bite of the cupcake. These are the good cupcakes. So we're going to bring everybody in now. We'll start with, here's Jim Majors. And here's Barney Tearspell. And here is Socka Count. And Cupcake is a punk. I agree wholeheartedly.
He's a lying punk, and that's all I got to say about that.
And I got to tell you, don't forget to take the gum out of your mouth before you get a cupcake. Okay. Again, this is another episode in our continuing series of Teach John Some Shit. And much like last week's discussion, I researched ahead of time. I knew a little bit about it beforehand. And as I was telling these fellows before we got started, I don't know whether I learned any more researching this or if I just confused myself more, just like last time. But
I'm really sorry I couldn't be here for the last one. And for those who weren't here on the last one, John now knows his ABCs front and backwards.
I do. But don't test me on the backwards part of it. So again, we're going to talk tonight about the difference between justified true belief and reasonable or reliable true belief. And this topic was chosen by Immutable Destiny, who's going to be a little bit late. We did have Nate Broady here. I see that he has dropped. He must be having maybe connectivity issues. But during last week's stream, as a matter of fact, I'm going to not torture any of you anymore with my actual image. In the live chat, Immutable Destiny, when this came up briefly in the discussion we had last week on epistemology, ontology, and related topics. Okay, that's Immutable in the live chat saying he'll be a couple more minutes. He posted in the live chat, hey, RTB versus JTB, that's a whole discussion in and of itself. And I put it to the panel when we were done last week, and they all wholeheartedly agreed. Well, oh yeah, there's a lot to that can be a stream in and of itself. So we're going to get started, and in a few minutes, Immutable Destiny will join us, and I hope. Here's Nate back right now. Let me bring him in. Welcome back, Nate.
Thank you.
So what we decided beforehand is, since Immutable's not here, I was going to throw the ball to him first since it was his discussion, but since he's going to be a few minutes late, I'm going to kick it over to Socka Count to open up and frame the conversation, and then everybody else can get in after Socka takes a few minutes. Take it away, Socka.
Okay. Wow. All right. I think like if you watch Nate's videos, he always has like the little disclaimer there, where it's just like, listen, this is not me acting as a lawyer. Do not take this as legal advice. Same thing here. I'm not a philosopher. I am a layman on this. A lot of this stuff is my opinion. A lot of this stuff is stuff that I've read or kind of studied on my own. There could be some details that I do get wrong. So don't take it as absolute gospel, but I think it is a neat topic for people to go take a look on themselves to learn more about this. Because this conversation kind of like rotates around what is knowledge? Okay, like when one utters a statement like, "Oh, I know this," what is it that they're actually saying? And that even after a couple thousand years of discussing this, there's still no kind of like consensus on what it means to know something. So we have these different theories of knowledge in which we can analyze that claim, and try to see which one kind of maps knowledge better. So the two ones that we're talking about right now are RTB versus JTB, justified true belief versus reliable true belief, or reliabilism. And this is an interesting conversation to have, because it really does change kind of like the framework and how we approach these questions of knowledge. So I'll start off with the common grounds between JTB and RTB, and that these they both contain the phrase true belief as a component of knowledge, because that's what these things are. Because we're talking about what the components of knowledge are, and so the first thing, that the easiest one to talk about, is the commonalities between them, and that is that at a minimum with both these systems, in order for you to say that you know something, that something is that you know something, you have to have that truth and belief content to it. So you can say that you know something if you believe that it is true and that it actually is true. Those are two components of it. Now, let me just break those two down. It's real simple. Knowledge exists as a subset of belief, which means that in order for you to know something, you also have to believe it. There's like all knowledge claims are also belief claims. Not all belief claims are knowledge claims, if you want to kind of look at the relationship that way. So the belief has to be a component of it. And this is under the understanding that a belief is just any proposition about reality that we think is true. So if you hold a belief in your head, you're holding a sentiment about something. Like, this is a dog. Okay, if somebody makes a utterance that this is a dog, that's a proposition. Okay, and if you say that you believe this is a dog, that is just stating what your feelings are about that, like that you believe that proposition is true, is essentially what you're saying with the statement, this is a dog. So to kind of expand that further, to utter this is a dog is to basically say, I believe it is the case that this is a dog. But we don't communicate like that, so we don't really include that part into the how we talk about these things. Now, there's nothing that I could really think of off the top of my mind, although there are some different kind of models out there. But at the very minimum, when we express any type of belief about knowledge, we're expressing something in relation to something that we believe is true. I don't think that there's any real seriously kind of proposed models where this isn't the case. So knowledge will always be that subset of belief. The second part of it is that it's actually true. Now, this is something that comes from just like kind of like linguistic kind of tradition as well, how we approach this. We only consider something to be considered to knowledge when it actually is the case, when it actually is true. And a good example of this is like how we refer to people that were wrong in the past. So 1,000 years ago, there might be people out there that say that the sun rotates around the earth. In fact, they would express almost like a high degree of certainty, like or knowledge claims about this. They'll say that they know that the sun rotates around the earth, but we now know that that's not the case. The earth actually revolves around the sun. So when we refer to these people in the past, we say that they believed this. This is something that they believed. We don't. There is no past tense for know like that. They knew it was true. We actually retroactively will take that knowledge away once we find out that something is false. So the next component to that they share is that truth factor to it. So for knowledge, bare minimum, it's got to be a belief that you hold, essentially that it's a proposition that you think is true, and it actually has to be true. those are the two ones that not really too controversial when we're talking about this. But then we get into the last stage, and that's just the justification or the reliabilist part of it. Now, JTB has been around for a lot longer than the reliabilism kind of model. And the justification came in a lot of different forms. You do an entire, couple hours talking about different internalist versus externalist models of justification, a lot of things. But the nature of the justification part of this was just the supporting evidence, therefore this. So within any type of logical syllogism, there's going to be presenting propositions. The propositional part, that's the justification for whatever the conclusion is. And it's the same thing with the knowledge claims. The justification part of it is just the things that would support the belief in the truth factor of this. So with reliabilism, it's pretty cut and dry how they laid out there. And I think we'll go into that one a little bit more later on. But the justification one is for JTB, I think, is where we should start. And I feel like I've already talked way too much. So if anyone that wants to start off with talking about,
that's your shtick, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, well, and you bring up the justification, and one of the notes, in the that I took from what I read and the videos that I watched, and I wish I could remember the channel that I found with this professor. I can't remember her name, but she was. The way she did her videos and explained things and the graphics she put on the screen, made it very easy to follow. But one of the things in those videos, because you talk about justification, and as part of, not to get ahead of what you were saying, but when she talked about the Gettier problems, the Gettier cases, justification does not equal knowledge, is what she said, or what Gettier said. But that if a justified, but like you alluded to, if a justified belief turns out to be true under JTB, you then have knowledge. But the justification in and of itself, because you can have a justification for your claim of knowledge, but you could have faulty evidence or be getting faulty sensory input.
Right. Well, I mean, you can dive into the nature of what justification is, what would count as justification. And one of the things that has brought up with justified true belief is that is it possible for something to meet all three criteria, that it's justified, that it's a belief, and that it's true, and still be wrong? And this was something that was presented through a series of problems called the Gettier problems. It was actually, if you read, Bertrand Russell's Problems of Philosophy, he actually describes it to as, how did he describe it? It's like lucky knowledge or lucky beliefs, which basically demonstrates the same type of thing, which is that if all that you need for something to be considered knowledge is a justification for it, that you actually believe it and that it's true, then anything that meets those three criteria technically should be considered knowledge. It can't be wrong. But we can present different examples out there where,
like the broken clock scenario. And
there's two common ones. There's the sheep one, and then there's the money in your wallet one. Yeah. Does anyone else want to kind of dive into that, or?
I just want to kind of add a little caveat onto the Gettier problem. If you don't think that the Gettier belief would count as knowledge, or you don't want it to, you can just say that belief is only knowledge if the justifications or the justifiers are in a direct causal relationship to the belief being true.
Yeah, that's true. This is a
justified true belief is knowledge if the belief is justified by the truth.
Yeah, well, and the fact of the matter is, people make a big deal out of Gettier problems, but I think that JTB is a fine theory, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. The outcome is still the outcome, and we still arrived at the same result that we would have ended up with our same justifiers that we would have maintained. So in the end, it's just an argument about semantics about what is knowledge.
Well, I think it kind of throws it back on the person. You know, is the person really justified in believing this is true? The happenstance of it being true, I do understand it is knowledge in the sense that it happens to be true, you believe it's true, and you're actually justified in believing it. But the overall objection is the person who believes it to be true, that's the part of JTB that's failing. It's the belief principle. Their belief isn't true. It's actually false.
But the problem seems to be, though, is that you can't really tell whether that justification is a good justification or a rational justification until you determine the end result, until you determine the truth factor of it, whether it's true or false. And then you can say, okay, there is a causal relationship or there is not one. And I might have been right, but I was going about it with the wrong method, but I still came up with the right answer.
Well, what about? Okay, wait a minute, hold on. So in the instance of, say, the clock scenario, okay, so a person has a clock that's on their wall. It's been working for years. They have no reason to believe that it's not working because it's been working for years. They look up at it one day and it says it's 3 o'clock, but lo and behold, and it is actually 3 o'clock, but lo and behold, the clock is broken. It stopped. And it just so happened when they looked at the clock, it was 3 o'clock and the clock said 3 o'clock, but the clock was not running. So even though they were right under what you were saying, Jim, so that person, did they have the knowledge that it was 3 o'clock just because by happenstance it happened to be 3 o'clock?
This all comes down to whether or not you came to your conclusion through a reliable belief forming process. So it doesn't necessitate that it's 100% free of error, but just that it there's no reason to believe that it wouldn't lead to the truth. So, for example, if I saw a bird flying upside down and I was like, "Huh, it looks kind of weird. I don't, that bird flying upside down. Okay, I think I have knowledge of this bird flying upside down. My eyes could be playing tricks on me, but for the most part, my eyes are reliable. So I would say that is a reliable belief forming process.
Well, I mean, that's getting more into reliabilism then. Like at that point in time, I think here's I like this example. Like the sheep in the field one is always a good one. Is that a farmer has a sheep and he's trying to find he wonders where it is, and so he looks out his kitchen window and he sees his sheep is standing on top of a hill, a few hundred yards away, and it's just like, okay, well, there's my sheep. So he goes out to go get his sheep and he walks across the field there, and as he gets closer, he realizes that, well, that wasn't his sheep. It was actually just a sheet, like a bed sheet that had got him stuck on a bush. But as he gets closer, he realizes his sheep is standing behind it. So when you look at it that way, were all the criteria met for this? And well, yeah. I mean, he was justified in believing it because he had a sheep. It was white, looked just like this sheep that was out there. He relied on his senses in that case, and that seemed like it was. He did believe that the proposition of the sheep was on the hill was true. So, in those categories there, he had. It met all three criteria for justification, truth, and belief. But we
actually cut out there for about 40 seconds.
No, it wasn't even that long. It was like 5 seconds.
Yeah, it was quick. It was quick.
Oh, okay.
Which part did I end up on?
They said
you would have to start them.
Oh, okay.
I'm just kidding. I don't know which part you cut out on, but it wasn't long.
Yeah, it seemed longer to me because it was on my end, but they're saying it was only for 5 seconds, so probably they didn't.
Okay. Well, the point was for the story is that he was justified in believing it. It was true that his sheep actually was there, and it was a belief. So all three criteria were met, but it was only by blind luck that it was true when you think about it. because it was entirely possible that his sheep wasn't on the hill. What happens if his sheep is down on the other side, or his sheep wasn't there at all? Then all of a sudden, for all the same criteria that went into that made that a true belief, would still be there, but it would be false. It wouldn't actually the truth factor would be taken out, and now all of a sudden this wouldn't be considered knowledge. So it was only by pure luck that this actually happened to be true. When he came to this conclusion, and so you have a scenario where depending on the actual location of the sheep, all three criteria could be met, and still we wouldn't consider that knowledge. That would be a type of lucky knowledge. That it actually happened this way.
Well, hold on. Can I just color the conversation in one point? When for justified true belief, so belief has to be true, but he has to believe it's true. So that piece, I'm understanding Gideon to be attacking the belief statement. He believes this to be true, but that's actually a false belief. What he believes is false. What he believes is not actually true. It's false. It just happens to be true. Something else.
Right. No, that's why
but he's not attacking the belief. He's attacking how they arrive at that belief.
Okay. All right. Got it.
Barney, were you trying to get in there?
No, I was just dying of consumption.
Oh, okay. So
that an important part of the discussion that is kind of unsaid is, why do we care? Like, who the fuck cares what's knowledge and what's belief? Why should we differentiate between the two?
Yeah, I mean, I think in most applications, in most of the ways that we use knowledge, like JTB is a perfectly reasonable theory, but whenever you want to get down and get stoned and talk philosophical, it's fun to think about Gator problems, but like I said before, it's really irrelevant because you arrive at the same conclusion either way.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't trying to be flippant. I meant like literally, why do we care in the philosophical context? Right? This question is.
You're trying to get deep.
Right. This goes all the way back to Plato's version of Socrates saying, I know that I know nothing. And that being the height of his philosophy, the height of his mental achievement as a philosopher.
Well, here's what I believe it's important philosophically is because you can believe something and it may or may not be true, but what we claim to know must be true. So it's about truth,
right? And you can even have good justification. You could even come to that belief through a reliable belief forming process and still be wrong.
But all of these theories of knowledge that we have, like all of them are trying to constrain the difference between mere belief and the knowledge belief, which is true, without it ever being apparent that we can know the truth of the matter, that we can get to the nomina which contains the truth, the truth value of the fact itself, right? We do not have access to that. We have access to the phenomena stemming from that truth, and then based on that phenomena, which we receive in more or less reliable but grossly unreliable ways, and interpret by insufficient means to form a belief of our own, which is just an evaluation of is it true or false for our consideration.
Right. And while there may be an objective truth, I think in very few scenarios we can arrive at that truth and know that we've reached that objective truth. And I think that for most things, the most important things actually, existential truths that we can only subjectively claw around in the dark looking for the objective truth and claim that we found it and never know.
Well, so why don't we qualify? I'm saying, why don't we qualify knowledge more like in the scientific context, like a provisional truth, instead of having justified true belief? It'd be more or less a provisional truth until you get some other evidence to change that belief. Because right now, whenever we have these conversations, sometimes we get hung up on truth and whether it needs to be absolute, whether it has to be a fact in reality, independent of what we believe about it or what we think about it. And since we can never obtain that from what it seems like you guys are saying, then we're talking about really just provisional truth until we can have some type of verification of it.
But I mean that doesn't help, because like the point is that throughout this is that verification. Okay, like there's certain things out there that might not be able to be verified, or that there's certain things out there that we just we almost have to how to put it if we're just waiting for something to be confirmed before we can say we know it, if we're looking, that's just saying that we can't actually know anything unless we're 100% certain on it. And one of the things that you notice between the justified true belief and the reliabilism viewpoints is that certainty is not part of the equation. The issue is that certainty is not a good measure of whether you know something. If someone comes up and generally believes that something is certain, that they have that certainty that they can't be wrong about it. How does that affect in the kind of like passing on that knowledge? How does this work? How do you transfer that knowledge to somebody else? You can't. And then the other issue with that is that
I disagree. It's called dogmatism.
Yes, that is true. Unless you're religious, then you have then you can do it. But like within the reason why we take that certitude out of there is because it doesn't matter how certain you are about something. You can have justified true belief or reliable belief that is formed, and still possess some doubts, but not have that take away from whether or not you can be confident in saying that you know it or not. And then we also run into problems with the other frameworks like verificationism, where like they'll say things like, well, you can't know something unless you know it like with certitude, and then finding out through different epistemic frameworks that you can't know anything if that's the case. That whether you're a foundationalist or a coherentist or foundationalist, doesn't matter what type of epistemic framework that you posit out there, is that all those have room for error, in which case you could never actually come to certitude on anything. So if certitude,
certitude and knowledge are two different things. Right?
I want to, and to anybody that wants to answer, or to Socka brought it up, but so when you talk about certitude, I mean, given like the problem of skepticism, and the different problems of skepticism, of not being able to, necessarily verify, the evidence that's being given to you, by your senses. I mean, can you ever know anything with 100% certitude?
Not until you look at it in the past tense. So, for example, if I were to take this slider and say, I believe that when I let go of this slider, it's going to fall. My justification is my a priori evidence of gravity working. So, and I let it go. Okay, the lighter fell. So that is true. But with what level of certainty? I don't have any other outside observers looking at it, so I have no external verification. So my eyes could be playing a trick on me. So I mean,
you could be dreaming. You could be dreaming. You could be dreaming.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think if we're talking about knowledge, we have to relinquish the absolute sense of truth, because even Socka just said if you're passing down knowledge. But Socka, I wanted to ask you. You mentioned you could, by passing down that knowledge, even if it's true or not. So it seems like you've now removed the truth value aspect of knowledge, because you're saying people can pass down false information as knowledge.
That's equivocation. There is a different meaning of the word knowledge, which just means information.
Okay, right? Fair enough.
Cognitive.
Well, under the justified true belief definition of knowledge, for example, is that we get a lot of the things that we claim from other people. Think about. I mean, that's all that school is really. That they're teaching you this stuff, and when we take that stuff as knowledge, because there's a certain amount of reliability that comes from the people that are put in place to instruct on this. This is where we talk about things like appeal to authority. Is that most of the time we'll say appeal to authority is a fallacious argument, when that person is not actually an authority in the thing that they're talking about. But not all appeals to authority are fallacious. We say that it's not an appeal to authority to talk to a physicist about physics, because that's an actual expert in the field. We give a certain amount of trust to that person, and that amount of trust that we give to people that have studied the topic counts as a justification for why what we think they say is true. So when you have people, for example, that let's say claim to be like psychologists or psychiatrists, and you find out that they don't actually have the education that they claim they have, or so they start off and you're just like, oh, well, you think this person is some type of authority, but then you find out that they actually don't have the education that they have or the knowledge on it. Well, then all of a sudden you wouldn't use them as an authority, and that you can no longer say that it's justified in believing anything that person says.
Hey, real quick, from the live chat, the messenger, and I read this and I wholeheartedly disagree with him. He says knowledge is simply evidence-based truth, provable by the one holding to it. And I say that can't be true, because many people believe they hold knowledge on certain things and are absolutely wrong.
I can kind of see where he's going. I would agree with him, but I would reword it and say that he has to have a causal connection to the truth from his justified belief.
Also, proof in a non-analytical system is not possible.
Yep, which is probably the biggest mistake there.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, it can be true without you having knowledge. I mean, that's irrelevant.
That's true. Yeah.
Hey, real quick,
the other thing too. The other thing too is that whenever you have a conversation with somebody and they say something as ridiculous as, "Well, knowledge is simply this," you can already tell that they're already wrong. But like I said, this is a discussion that's been going on for 2,000 years. Even longer than that. There is no consensus on what knowledge is. That's why we have these different theories of knowledge, these different theories of justifications. This is why we talk about this stuff, because it is interesting to find out, the different models and kind of where you sit in them. But knowledge is not simply just anything that one person can point to. It's a complete ignorance of the person to think that, that they have the answer, that whatever they're going to assert in this case is true. I just don't trust anybody that says that. In the video from that professor I was talking about, one of her videos, the way she put it, it's difficult to explain the nature of knowledge itself and to say how knowing something is true. I mean, like you said, it's been being debated for thousands of years, and how it differs from just believing or thinking something is true. I mean, will we ever get an answer to this?
No. Because we can never agree on what knowledge is. I mean, I think that's pretty evident.
Real quick, since I'm not real good at getting in the live chat, doing the multitasking thing, I just want to say thanks to Loose for Almighty, Tony Designs here, Math Pig, Messenger Reveals, Hey Maya Addison. Thank you, Maynard Sage, for the $2 super chat, and thank you to everybody who's here tonight. But go ahead, whoever wants to pick up on where we left off.
I just wanted to jump into Socka's face a little bit on one thing that he said, that there is...
Yes, please do.
Virtuous appeal to authority, which I believe is utter nonsense. Like, it depends on what you mean. If you're saying that we need to trust a physicist about physics, I would say that that's a fallacious appeal to authority. If you're saying that a physicist should have the good arguments to support his claims about physics, and that's what makes him an authority, then yeah, sure, that's fine. If you understand, if you see the distinction, right?
Well, so you're not claiming, Barney, that all appeals to authority are fallacious, then?
No, all appeals to authority are fallacious.
You are saying that. Well,
yes. So general relativity is true because Einstein said so, and Einstein is the most eminent physicist and scientist of all time, and that's rubbish. right? That is utter rubbish. The reason why we will invoke Einstein is because Einstein presented detailed, reasonable arguments and made
right,
conclusions from that. Right?
So I think here's where the disconnect is. It's two different ideas. Okay, the reason that. Okay, so maybe somebody makes a claim, okay, and then their interlocutor says, "Well, give me citations, show me evidence that what you're saying is true." So then they show them like scientific evidence from Einstein or whoever. They link them to some papers or something, by an expert, and show them where their claim of knowledge came from, and then somebody will say, "Oh, well, that's just an appeal to authority," and I don't see how that's true. I mean, you're basically just backing up your claims.
So here's an example of what I'm talking about. In the debate between, I think it was William Lane Craig versus the physicist, who was it? Damn it.
Sean Carroll?
Sean Carroll. Yeah, Sean Carroll. Or maybe it was Carroll. Anyways.
Sean Carroll.
William
with the flanking part? Yeah, Sean Carroll.
William Lane Craig brings up an argument of from Vilenkin's paper and presents the argument, right? That there must necessarily be a cause to the universe. And then Carroll calls out Vilenkin, which is in the audience, and says, "Hey, Vilenkin, do you agree with that?" And Vilenkin says, "No." Right? Who was committing the fallacy of an appeal to authority there?
Well, I don't think it's really an appeal to an authority.
Both of those are appeals to an
like
authority.
quote mining, right? It's like you see it all the time from like apologetics that like people try and use like a particular paper, a particular phrasing from a paper to try and make a point that it's not actually making. And I mean, usually, right, the go-to is if you think your argument is saying one thing but it doesn't, shouldn't you not ask the person who's presenting the argument itself, to try and clarify that point? Like, hey, is that what you meant when you said YZ?
The keyword there is to clarify that point, right? Vilenkin is the best positioned person in that situation to present the argument of why William Lane Craig's interpretation is wrong. But his mere assertion that it's wrong, based on the fact that he is the author of the paper, is valueless as an argument. That's a fallacious appeal to authority.
Well, hold on, but a flat earther could do that too. The flat earther could appeal to Einstein and say that the Earth is flat. But I went and considered that an appeal to authority because they're not using the information that he presented in the correct way. You know what I mean?
Right, because there's not a causal process there. There's not a link. You should be able to relate it in a direct connection. So I could make the claim, evolution is true. And I could have, direct causal connections to that connects my evidence, my justifications to the truth. Whereas somebody who was using Einstein for the flat Earth, they would have to, do all kinds of gymnastics and stuff, and obviously not have any sort of causal connection.
Well, what about in apologetics? One that I hear a lot is people will quote. Jesus Christ, I can't. Who the hell wrote Origin of Species? Darwin, yeah.
Darwin.
Yeah, they'll quote Darwin about the complexity of the eye, and point to that and say, that he was even agreeing that the eye was designed. But what they're doing is they're quote mining. They're not showing whole quote. Mm-hmm. So if that's a fallacious appeal to authority, well, then if you go and you show the full quote to substantiate that that what they're saying is wrong, then is that also a fallacious appeal to? I mean, I'm not.
Well, hold on. I think we're quoting the wrong fallacy because there is appeal to false authority, which right. I think Barney has outlined. Appeal to authority is appeal to authority who's actually not an authority, and then you have appeal to a false authority where you're saying this person is an authority, but he's not an authority on what you're saying.
Right, but there's an appeal to a legitimate appeal to authority.
The whole point of the fallacy is that you are presenting the authority as though they themselves are the argument. This person who is really smart and knowledgeable in this field says that it is so, therefore it is so. That is a fallacious statement, regardless of who that person is. This person who is very knowledgeable in this field is in the best possible position to present a good argument is not a fallacy. And then their argument might have merit. But people who have been very smart and very knowledgeable in their fields, who are to this day lauded as the fathers and the originators of the field of physics, were often wrong about something in their opinions or in their conclusions. Right?
Hold on, but the fallacy is using an alleged authority as evidence in your argument when the authority is not really an authority on the facts relevant to the argument. That's the appeal to authority.
Nate, no, it's not. It is using any authority, not a false authority, any authority.
No, it says using an alleged authority. Using an alleged authority as evidence in your argument when the authority is not really an authority on the facts relevant to the argument. That's appeal to authority.
That's the way I've always understood it too.
So yes, that is one form of an appeal to authority. But just saying, I don't know, Robert Penrose discards the explanation of the inflationary theory is not an argument against the inflationary theory. Right?
But
Robert Penrose is the eminent physicist in the field of cosmological cosmogony, right? He is the authority at the moment.
Right. Goldman says that in order for our justification for our belief to be considered to be, or for our belief to be considered knowledge, that we had to arrive through it by a process that was, pardon me, that was in a sense reliable. And Goldman says that in order to be reliable, that there has to be some sort of a cognitive mechanism that can enable a person to discriminate or differentiate between incompatible state of affairs. So we should be able to perceive and what is, we should be able to perceive within a reliable parameter of beyond a shadow of a doubt, you know, this is blue, this is black, this is white, this is gray, you know, and be justified in saying that even though we cannot be 100% certain, it is a reliable cognitive mechanism.
Thank you for bringing this back on topic, and I'm sorry I drew it.
No worries.
Away. But yeah, so Goldman actually supports JTB under certain conditions. He, from what I've seen, he kind of supports justified true belief within academic discussions, within not academic, within things which are subject to reason. If you can through reason show your justification, then you're justified in calling that knowledge.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying by causal connection. Like he replaced JTB with a causal theory where he replaced justification with a causal connection. So he didn't care, you know, whether or not you thought that you had good justification to arrive at the belief or if the belief was even true, but that you had a direct causal connection that that relies upon a cognitive mechanism.
Even if it was unknown to you.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I just want again, like, because it's like I've heard this before, and I just want to clarify this one point: is what Nate had said earlier. The certainty is not required for knowledge. You can't at this point in time, like most people have abandoned certainty as or certitude. Sorry. As something that's even obtainable in most situations. When we, even if we can kind of get down to the, trying to define knowledge, if we can kind of agree upon a definition for here, just for sake of argument, this runs us into a whole bunch of problems later on, when you realize that there's certain things that are just beyond knowledge. Certain things that we can't know due to, the only way that we can ever try to justify them is through some type of fallacious appeal. So, for example, like the belief that your memory is reliable, is only a belief. You can't know that your memory is reliable, because the very first step that you'd have to implore, but to know that your memory was reliable, would be trying to remember all the times that your memory was reliable. You'd have to you'd have to use the very same thing to try to verify that, and then you can get to like this idea that's like, well, I could always ask the person beside me, but that's another, how do you know that person's there?
Well, and
how do
you run
that
into another problem.
Right.
I just looked up the Powerball odds, and the odds of winning are 1 in. I'm sorry.
No, I was laughing because I looked them up yesterday.
I just looked up the Powerball lottery, and the odds of winning the Powerball currently are 1 in 292,201,338. So if I were to go and buy one ticket right now, and I sat and I waited, and they had already picked the numbers for the Powerball, but I hadn't checked them yet. I missed the calling for whatever reason. Am I justified in saying that I know that I didn't win, even though my odds are 1 in 292 million plus?
So there is a resolution to this, which is kind of one step beyond the reliable true belief theory, which is the tracking theory of knowledge, right? That adds the conditions of counterfactuals, right? It is not merely the certainty. It is not merely the probability of you being right, which is sufficient. It is that if it weren't so, you wouldn't believe it. And if it was so, that you would believe it, right? And that case of the lottery, where you are just relying on the probability of it being so, fails the first condition, the sensitivity condition, right? If you had a ticket, you would be 99.9999999% certain that it's not going to win. That's not knowledge, because if that was the winning ticket, you would still be 99.9999999% certain that it's not going to win.
Right. Well, I mean, if I never checked it, that is.
Hey, welcome to Immutable Destiny.
Because once I check it, then that becomes 100%. Then I can say that there is a truth value that can be established, but whether or not I had knowledge is irrelevant at that point. But
I want to ask. Oh, go ahead, John.
No, I just wanted to say welcome to Immutable Destiny. This topic idea was his. I want to thank him for that. And if there's anything you wanted to get in and say, Immutable, please do.
No, I mean it's an interesting conversation so far. I mean, I think, and maybe the panelists, like maybe our fellow guests, can give their insight on this. But I was thinking, an issue like for which, like both JTB and RTB might have an issue is, so suppose in a hypothetical universe, right? There's a person and their job is to flip a coin, right? And they're doing this continuously. So the laws of probability say, look, there's a chance to hit heads, there's a chance to hit tails. But every time, like every person who's ever flipped a coin, like, and this happens continuously, only hits heads. Tails has never been obtained by any of the experimenters playing this little thought experiment out. So I'm kind of wondering, like, so since people would only have observed the state of heads, right? Would they be justified in believing that, I don't know about this whole tails kind of situation?
So that's not exactly a problem of knowledge. That's more of a problem of inductive reasoning, right? That the information you might be receiving might be unreliable. That is contained in every theory of knowledge.
Yeah.
Every theory of knowledge admits that perfect knowledge is impossible, that you could be mistaken based on the information that you have, because you are suffering from epistemic limits. There are things which you do not know about the system. Now, inductivity says that what was true in the past will likely be true in the future. So if you're kind of defining your laws of nature by merely looking at the regularities which you observe, such as I flip a coin and it's heads, and I flip it again and it's heads, and I do that 1 million times and it's always heads, and I do it 1 million more and it's always heads, and I give it to you and you flip it 10 more million times and it's always heads. Am I then safe in concluding that it'll be heads the next time I flip it? So David Deutsch strongly argues against inductivism in any case, and what he brings about as a resolution to that problem is explanatory power. Now, this is not the same thing as the inference to the best explanation. It is just whether your inductive reasoning sufficiently explains why that is so, why the law that you're observing is such as it is, why the regularity is such as it is. And when you flip a coin and you observe that it has two sides and that it can fall equally on two sides, you can observe that the fact that you have had all heads does not explain your prediction that it will be the head next time, right? So induction for him is a tools, but insufficient tools for knowledge if you lack the explanation.
Yep.
So
I guess he would go with something like deductive reasoning, like using mathematical formulae or something of that equivalent, or
That's not applicable in
Reasoning
all.
has its own problems.
sorry, what?
Right.
I was just saying that it's not applicable in all scenarios. I mean, you can't
No,
always
no.
deduce
Yeah,
via
that's-
mathematics.
Right.
well, what are you talking about, like a Bayesian analysis then?
Oh, that particularly has problems.
Right, especially when you lack a priori evidence.
Hey, you know what? One time I was arguing with this presuppositional apologist, and there was this reasoning that they asked me about, and I wanted to put it to the panel. But it all depends if we agree with this one statement. The only thing that you could truly know is what you believe. Do we agree with that statement?
No.
Yes.
No.
Well,
And you
hold on.
see where the confusion is.
Okay, yeah, there's two ways that you can interpret that. Okay, one is, like we said, is that like knowledge is a subset of belief. Okay,
Yes.
which is to say that if it is the case that you could know something for certainty, for certain, then it would also have to be a belief. In which case,
Yeah.
that is true.
And
but
truth
if
would
it's,
have to be relative.
yeah. But then if you view it as in what you like, if you're saying that just like what you believe is also what you know, but just in the broad sense, that just doesn't work. That doesn't make sense at all. Then they're just using them as synonyms of each other.
But I get the play on words though.
But boy, that would be a very easy theory of knowledge. If you believe it, you know it. I mean,
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
That's not what the person was saying. That's not what the person was saying. The exact quote is, the only thing that you can actually know is what you believe. It's saying that the only thing that you can actually, like, we have all these problems with our theories of knowledge, of actually saying, can we actually know something? But this person is saying this is the one thing that we can absolutely know is what you personally believe. That's the only.
Yes.
well,
Yes.
that's like right. And that's what, like Socka was saying, is because knowledge is a subset of belief, you can't
Yes.
know something without also
Without believing.
So
Yeah.
it's true in that sense for sure.
Right, but
Yes.
then again, justification. I mean, your belief is just justification for another belief. That's so I mean, and that's just a regress all the way back to some axiomatic starting position, some normative. But I'm of the mind that you can't have a belief without justification.
Well, where does that belief come from then? Right. Like,
I have justification for it.
Can't have belief without justification. Like, how are you justifying your justification?
With my justification.
Justification
For another
doesn't
belief.
justification doesn't have to be correct, doesn't have to be complete, doesn't have to be interpreted correctly, but it is still justification.
Right, unless we're wanting to it to be established as knowledge, and then in that case, it does have to have what I call a causal link or a causal connection.
Yeah, I'm not sure the reliability of the system used. I'm just trying to say, like, if you're going to say, for instance, like that, that some a priori like starting position needs justification, like, or some belief like needs justification for whatever reason, it kind of begs the question as towards, okay, well, what is your justification for holding that particular belief is true? And once that question is answered, it becomes another iterative process.
Sure, that's what I'm saying. It's a regressive argument. You go back to some normative.
Hold on real quick, Jim. Socka was trying to get in there a minute ago.
Oh, my bad, Socka.
You're good, Jim. But also, before you go, Socka, I just want to say too that because, and correct me if I'm wrong, fellas, I mean, you can be justified in a belief, but it's not. But that doesn't make it knowledge, right?
Right.
Well, hold on. He said you had to be
justified false belief is a thing. Yes.
Well, hold on. Can I ask a question? Jim is saying that you have to be believe to justify something, right? I don't want to misquote you.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
You were saying that you have to be justified to believe something. Am I misquoting you with that?
I'm saying that I'm of the mind that you can't hold a belief without justification.
Okay.
Yeah. So okay. So there's two responses that I want for that one. Like, one is, yeah, I agree with him, and two is, no, I don't agree with him. It really depends. Like, I believe that you should have justification for your beliefs. Okay. And at that point, that, like, I think should be the case. If you hold to a belief, if you actually hold to this like a proposition about reality that you think is true, and you have no good reason to actually believe that it's true, I don't know how that doesn't also describe somebody being irrational. Like who would do that? Like, who would hold to a belief in something, but then say, well, why do you believe this? But, like, I don't know.
People say that all the time. Hold on. People have irrational beliefs.
Wait.
Have irrational beliefs.
Let me clarify what he just said, though. Okay, because I don't think what he's trying to say is that because someone has an irrational belief, that they in fact are an irrational person.
Right.
Talking about specific.
No, I totally agree.
Right.
Yeah, there's a difference. People need
like somebody with schizophrenia, like a young woman who thinks that she's a princess. How do you convince her that she's not a princess? How do you prove that she's not a princess?
You don't. Stay far away.
But you see what I mean? I mean, she is justified in holding the belief that she's a princess based on her mental affliction.
Well, I mean, I'm not quite.
I'm not quite following you with that one.
So if she has schizophrenia and she believes that she's a princess, she's justified in believing that she's a princess.
No, but that's our justification for why she's believing that. That's not her justification on why. I don't know if I'm explaining my objection.
Right. But what we're arriving at here, though, is two different truths.
Her justification for her being a princess is that she's a princess.
Yeah, I mean, but we're arriving at two different truths, though. In the end, it's another Gettier problem, really. But
so Socka, you're trying to get in. Go ahead, and then Immutable.
Yeah, I mean, and this is where the different frameworks come in too. Like on a coherentist type of model, there's going to be this disconnect between your mental state and what you can experience of a perceived external world. So this is where that causal relation thing comes in, is that sensory input would be considered something like in a model like that would be considered a type of belief, a cognitive spontaneous belief. It just kind of appears. I'm looking at this desk and there's a cup in front of me. That you might call it just the sensory data is in fact also like a belief of some form, because the thoughts in your mind, because you're not talking about the actual object of the cup on the table itself. you only have access to what you're thinking about, and that's this idea in your head. There's this cup on the table in front of you, and if it's in your head, it's automatically, it's not the cup itself; it's the belief in that cup. So that sensory data itself is in fact a belief of some form.
So any sensory data that you accept is in fact a belief.
Well, on some models of epistemology, some models, not all of them. Like this is for something like a brand of like coherentism, for example. And so under a system like that, that belief would be justified by, it could only be justified by the coherence model, which is just coheres with other beliefs you have. But that would be the justification for something like that. So you'd have to, so for even in that case, that belief would be justified in that way, is what I'm saying.
Immutable.
So I'm agreeing with Jim. Yes, justification for beliefs is good.
Yeah, justification also has its own criteria and differentiations, such as reliability and ambiguity, and right. Is it pointing to one thing only? Is it pointing to one thing only to the exclusion of all others? Is it necessary? Right? Is that a deductive consequence of that justification, or is it just enabling it? Is it I don't know how to properly say this, but
facilitating.
Let's say the belief in God, right? You can justify the belief in God by the fact that God created everything, everything exists, and God is defined as an omnipotent creator who can create everything. Since everything exists, therefore God exists because God created it. There is justification in that, right?
That's completely fallacious, though.
That justification.
That's valid, but not sound, isn't it?
No, it's ambiguous. The problem is not in its validity or soundness. It is in the ambiguity of prediction, right? That goes for any possible and impossible universe. That goes under any circumstance. You cannot differentiate real and unreal using that reasoning. There is no way to say what is right or wrong using that reasoning. So it is completely ambiguous. The justification is there, but you cannot discern the truth of the matter from it.
So I think that we've kind of we talked about a lot of different things here. But I think that now is time to grab and jump into the main difference between the topic matter, justified true belief versus reliable true beliefs. And the problem with the justified true belief, and it's not a huge problem, obviously. I mean, like I'm with Jim in this. I think for the sake of conversation, that JTB is a really good starting place to have these conversations. That I think you can get a lot of places if you agree upon JTB as a definition of knowledge. But the question always comes into justification. What does it mean for justification? How do you employ justification? Is there a way that we can describe what a justification is that's irreducible, other than just stating it as justification again? So this leads to a lot of problems, and a lot of problems that have been, there are kind of solutions for it. We brought up Getty problems. A lot of times people they won't even really describe JTB as JTB anymore. They'll use something like JTB plus, which is plus is the, all the little solutions that would have to be kind of baked into, making that that's, justifying things like the Getty problems and stuff.
Basically, reliabilism. S knows that P, if and only if S has a true belief formed by a reliable belief forming process.
Right. Yeah, and this gets you into reliabilism, which is
what I love. That's my shit.
Yeah, and reliabilism is an interesting, because reliabilism is, as a theory of knowledge, is really simple. It's really simple. That's like Jim just said. Somebody is justified in believing something, or is having knowledge of something, if that belief is formed through a reliable cognitive process. And this is what we call something. It's a pragmatic theory. Essentially, it works, so let's use it. Or it appears to work.
And being reliable doesn't mean 100% certainty. It doesn't mean 0% errors. It's just the most reliable methodology. I mean, all we have is our perception, and that has to be good enough, because that is, indeed what we use to determine everyday beliefs and justifications. We look both ways before we cross the street. We listen for cars. We feel for the vibrations of the road. We rely on our perceptions to determine whether or not it's safe to cross the street. I will further add that nobody prays before they cross the street, because that'd be fucking stupid.
So it works to a point, and it works on some level, but there is a huge problem with it, in that to know that you know something, you need to know that the process is reliable. And to know that the process is reliable, you need to know about the context of the process, because a context which is usually reliable is not reliable in every context.
So here we go.
When you're looking at visual illusion, that is a context in which your eyesight, which is usually considered a reliable source of information, that the information is literally formed in such a way to make your eyesight an unreliable source of information,
like a mirage.
So this is actually a great point. What Barney brought up, because it brings up something I talked about earlier, which has to do with internalist versus externalist justifications for knowledge. And what Barney said is right on an internalist justification. You can't say that you know something unless you know that you know it. This is called the KK principle. That you're always going to have this problem like that. You can potentially, there are some solutions for it, but on the most part, you're going to run into this problem where if you make a statement like, how do you know this? And then the answer is going to be, well, I know this because of this reason, because this other piece of knowledge. Well, how do you know that you know that? And then again, you'd have to answer that question. And on this internalist justification, you always have to justify how you know that you know something, and then how you know that you know that you know something. Now, there also is an easy way around what Barney's presenting here. That's just an externalist justification for knowledge, which is for something like reliabilism. You can bring up something like that our senses, you don't have to appeal to something inside yourself. You can appeal to the outside factors as well. So evolution has shaped us in such a ways that our senses are generally reliable, would be a justification that you need for your senses being reliable. That's it. That's an externalist justification. And when you get to a lot of conversation with theists, they don't like this. This just appeal to this external standard. They want you to justify something by internally. They want you to know that you know something, and they're going to keep on asking that question. And if you appeal to something external to yourself, then you're just what they would call. They might say you're just, begging the question or something. They throw some fallacy at you, but you're not.
I would agree with
but here's the point. Hold on, I just want to finish the point. But theists aren't in any better of a position, because all their knowledge would have to be justified through the way they were designed, shaped by God, something that's external to them. When you get into a conversation about epistemology or theories of knowledge or theories of justification with theists that tries to hold you to an internalist justification, like, how do you know that you know something? They're only going to appeal to an externalist justification. That's the reliability of their senses as designed by their creator, which is purely externalistic. So why couldn't you do the same?
The reason why I would agree with a hypothetical theist in that case is because to rely on an external source of knowledge needs to be an internal source of knowledge. Like
But you're not relying on an external source of knowledge. We're relying on something that's shaped through an external process. That's what it is.
Yes, but to even accept that there are external sources of knowledge is an internal process. So my way of resolving the whole issue is kind of what I alluded to. What I alluded to at the beginning. What?
No, I said you just broke my brain.
Go ahead. the way that I resolve the issue is kind of what I alluded to at the beginning. Knowledge for an individual, for a person, is an utterly useless concept. The way to go about things, from my perspective, is to strive to have your beliefs be reasonable and be justified and be all those good things that we have listed in the many different theories of knowledge, but accept them as beliefs. And the relevant part for you yourself should be an understanding. Does this form a coherent image of the world? Does this make me understand how things work? Does it enable me to predict what other things are? And that way, you can compare your understanding and your beliefs with the understanding and beliefs of other people, regardless of what they are. Because as soon as you believe that you know something, you are giving yourself warrant to disregard everybody who disagrees with you.
You're kind of talking about explanatory power now, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like there's some people that may argue, for instance, like there's some theories that we know are more or less like almost certainly going to end up being true. For instance, like somebody may, like quantum mechanics is a theory that works. It's very successful. It's never been challenged. It makes accurate predictions. It's extremely useful in many fields, but
except for relativity, right?
Yeah, but like to call it a coherent theory, or a theory that kind of, I guess, makes sense, like in colloquial language, is kind of stretching it. It's, and I think that's why some people are kind of skeptical towards, like some people may be susceptible towards scientific knowledge, like needing to change or needing to be in accordance to kind of what we view as making sense or being coherent. Like in the case of quantum mechanics, not having this weird like superposition or quantum fuzziness, to give an example.
Well, I mean, going back to what Socka said a few minutes ago, you know, the topic of the discussion, and if each one of you wants to answer this, but I'd like to hear, you know, from Socka, from Immutable, who brought this topic to us. Is there a capsulized or short answer to the question? What's the difference between JTB and RTB? I mean, albeit that it's a deep rabbit hole, is there any way to capsulate?
I think it's just the addition of that little caveat, just that it's not just if you have a true belief and that you I think in order to have knowledge, that you have to have a true belief that is formed by a reliable cognitive process. So that reliable cognitive process, having your belief formed based upon that, I think is what separates them essentially.
But couldn't that be just a justification, though? Like, couldn't what you just said be a justification and then fit as a subset of the justified true belief, right?
For what belief? A justification for what belief?
No, well, your reliable true belief, what you've laid out as a process. In that process, you're justifying your knowledge, and that seems to be justified true belief. Except you just have a set process to justify it, rather than many different ones.
Not just a set process, but within my methodology, there's a causal connection.
RTB is a subset of the JTB.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. RTB is a subset of the JTB.
Yeah, that's, well, it's JTB plus, but the JTB plus has negative connotation. But yeah,
yeah, I guess like
you didn't want to give us the point.
Yeah, I guess it would be like the easiest way to put it is that when you talk about JTB, just you're talking about more of what we'd call, I guess, propositional justification. The compared to reliabilist framework, which would be more doxastic.
So, all right, we brought up Gettier earlier, okay, and Michael Clark, in a response to a paper that Gettier put out, whereas Gettier would say that a subject knows a proposition, S knows P. If P is true, S believes that P is true, and S is justified. And Michael Clark adds to that a fourth criteria, that it is on true grounds that S believes that P is true. Does that?
So that's
the plus that you're talking about?
No, that's a different plus. That's the no false lemma theory of knowledge, right?
Mm-hmm.
That JTB works if it doesn't contain any false knowledge in it whatsoever.
Yep.
Right. But then that has its own problems, similar to the Gettier problems. There are cases in which you can have that setup and still you wouldn't call it knowledge.
Right. And I also want to remind everybody that regardless of whether there is a Gettier problem or it's arrived at using bad knowledge, the truth is the truth, and you will never be able to. I mean, no matter what happens, I mean, you're still coming to the end result. Somebody is going to have, potentially somebody is going to have knowledge, even though you don't, because it's the case is what it is, regardless.
But you change the context of the conversation, because we're talking about a means test, and you're talking about the ends. Well, just because the ends are what they are, it is knowledge. But we're actually talking about the means, how to get to that particular point.
But when you get there, regardless, is what I'm saying, is that you whether or not, but it's whether or not you are justified, or whether or not you have the same definition of knowledge as the other person. That's really all it is a semantic argument. But the process itself does nothing to determine whether or not does nothing to determine what the outcome of the situation is.
Well, I don't know. I agree with that to an extent. Yes, the outcome of the situation is set. It's probably set before we even go through the exercise. But the argument here is not about the outcome. It's about how do we get to the outcome, and then how can we verify it. That's what we've always been talking about. So when you said the truth is the truth is the truth, I think we all agree with that. But the explanations here that we're giving is a means in which we make it to that ultimate outcome. So you're right. The outcome may be the same, but the means and how we get there and distinguish that it is what it is, that's what we're arguing right now.
Right. You're putting a certain value on awareness, on knowledge, because it is like you said, you can see that it's true whether or not we arrive to that conclusion, but you just hold a certain value in knowing that the truth in the matter. So that meme that was circulating the internet, like, is the dress white or blue or black or gold or whatever? Like, people, like, I was one of the people who really wanted to know what fucking color is this dress,
They both were right. Both colors.
The truth is what it is, regardless of whether or not you care or regardless of what position you hold.
But even in that example that you gave with the dress, the person who saw the dress to be gold and the person who saw the dress to be blue, they both saw the actual color. They saw, yes, they were both correct. Neither person who said they saw a different color was actually wrong about the color of the dress. I know that's confusing.
No, that's not true.
What was the actual color of the dress? What was the actual color of the dress?
I believe it was
black and blue. No, it was black and blue.
The point is exactly. The point is that there's only one truth to it. The dress couldn't have been both colors, because truth isn't subjective. Okay, it's not subjective to the observer. Okay, and that's the point that you're trying to put out there.
No, not at all. Can I explain before you go down that road? I'm not saying that truth is subjective at all. No, I disagree with that 100%. I'm saying that truth was objective to the individual observer. For instance, the reason why the dress came in two colors is because hold on, let me finish.
Okay, I'm going to let you finish. What you just said was it's subjective.
That's called.
Okay, yeah. But let me finish. Each person's the way each person's eye, I forgot what it was. There was a condition where one person, if your eye was built this way or your eye developed this way, you're going to see it to be gold, and if your eye was developed this way, you're going to see it blue. So these people, so no matter what happens, the true color for them is what they've seen, and that's why each person, when they see it, even if you actually see the actual dress, you're going to see the color that your eyes were shaped to see. Well,
So
somebody who has a different situation,
So
want to see gold, I'm going to see blue.
suffer from this condition, if they suffer from this vision condition, then they have justification to hold that belief, but that does not make that belief true.
But it would be true to them though, because color is dressed to is gold to them.
But here's the
It doesn't matter.
problem.
There is an objective truth.
Hold on.
It's not objective. It's not.
Hold on. Stop. Everybody stop. Everybody's talking over one another. Barney and then Jim. Go ahead, Barney.
Nate, I've seen the dress in both of its states. Like literally about a year after I first saw it, I saw the same image and thought, interesting, somebody changed the colors on it. So it's not in the eye, it is in the perception. The dress itself has an objective truth, and there are pictures of it. You can Google them. It is black and blue, and in the image itself, it is black and blue if you take a picker tool and just select the colors. So there are objective truths about both the image and the dress. Saying that something is objective to one person literally means that it is subjective. That the word objective doesn't apply in that context.
And then go ahead, Jim. And then Jim, after Jim Socka. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, so the even though they see it this way, it doesn't make it objective, even to them. Something can't be objective to one person and not the other. Objective, I would feel comfortable equating that with saying universal, because like they said, there is an actual color of the dress, and it can be reached. A conclusion can be reached using these causal connections. We can go back to the manufacturer. We can look at it with our look at the material with our own eyes, and we can have external verification in natural light, in the sunlight, and come to a consensus of what color it is. It's not like we're saying it's light blue or it's robin egg blue. It's there's a very clear difference here, and there is some objective truth, even though the colors may have a loose spectrum themselves. That's all I got to say.
Yeah. The only thing I would say is that if this perception thing, or if you're saying that it could be true for different people depending on the beliefs that they form from it. I mean, it's like saying that you go to a magic show, and how the magic's done. That the magician didn't actually just saw that person in half, but your 8-year-old kid doesn't know that, and because your 8-year-old kid actually believes that this woman was sawn in half, does not make it objectively true for them that woman was sawed in half.
Yeah, it's like Messenger Reveals. Messenger Reveals believes in his head. He believes with 100% certainty that he can cure PTSD, but we all know that he's full of shit and he can't do it. And there are causal connections that we can take to prove that he's full of shit.
Well, let's not go down this rabbit hole, man. But go ahead, Nate.
No, I just want to make the point. First, just about the actual truth. I do agree. There is an actual truth. I have no disagreement with that. My argument or my objection was really to the verification of this objective truth that we're all trying to put out there. The reason why I use the example of the dress, and I can use the example of somebody who's colorblind or what have you, is that we're saying that we're verifying that this is true with someone else, and that person could have a different opinion. So to say we even have knowledge of the color of the dress itself, yes, that knowledge is based on your perception. And right now we don't know. I don't know if I'm in the minority or the majority of people who see that dress. Now, does that dress have an absolute color? Yes. But again, I think the lines of verification of what that actually is, especially if you have a situation where 50% of the population sees it one way, 50% of the population sees it the other way, and we're both appealing to our eyes or our senses that don't all have to align, and we're all saying that then what is the color of the dress? If we all can't agree,
Well, I think
that's my argument.
Let me address
Be
that
called
point.
knowledge whenever it only fulfills two of the.
Jim, please stop. All right, you kind of jumped on me there. Look, I think what it is it's the difference between you're saying that perception is subjective, but you can't say that truth or knowledge is subjective. You know, you just said yourself there's an actual color to the dress, and what you're talking about is subjective perceptions of what the color of the dress is.
So just Nate, okay. So we've talked about that. The question. This is going to be fun. The definition of knowledge is something that still, after over 2 millennia, hasn't been resolved. Here's another one: truth. There's different theories of truth as well, that don't have a consensus. Well, now, I mean, on the bright side, most people would subscribe to a correspondence theory of truth, because when we talk about truth, we're actually talking about different theories of truths. So a correspondence theory of truth is to say that something is true if it corresponds to reality. There's a state of affairs in which it corresponds to. Then you can say that that thing is true. But there's also like a coherence theory of truth, where we're talking about, we start getting to talk about populations, essentially, in that way. Not a lot of people subscribe to that. But I think most of us in this room would agree that for something to be true, it has to correspond to a state of affairs, which means that there's truth makers that exist out in the world. And those truth makers is what gives something the quality of being true. And those things all exist external of people's minds. If you see something, you perceive it in such a way that you think it's one way, but it turns out it's something else, it wasn't true for you, because the truth makers don't exist in your mind. Truth makers will always exist external of you, So when you start positing something like that, it could be true to a person, you're talking about a different theory of truth at this point in time that, we'd have to clarify what theory of truth you're using first off, and what does it mean then for something to be true. But for most of us that use this correspondence theory, something is true if it corresponds to reality. Those truth makers that make something true exist external of yourself. And if you think that something is true because of some type of internal sensation that you have, well, that truth maker isn't there. It's outside of you, so it can't be true.
Jim? I cut you off a minute ago. What were you trying to say?
Oh, no, I'm good.
So I don't know if we want to enter one more rabbit hole here tonight, but I'd kind of like to talk about skepticism and how it's related to theories of knowledge. Because, over the last several minutes, it was brought up, about sensory input and, the reliability of your senses, as constructed, by evolution. And, we can count on our sensory perceptions, sensory data, because through induction, we can show that they've been reliable in the past. But now when you throw skepticism in there and you throw things in like, like the evil genius scenario or solipsism, or last Thursdayism, so I don't know who wants to have something to say about this, but if anybody, has anything, to share on how skepticism is related to theories of knowledge and how it, changes the conversation, please speak up.
If nobody else wants to, I can go.
Sure.
There's a difference between being skeptical and having subscribing to radical skepticism. Radical skepticism exists as a very, not a really good position for anybody to really subscribe to, because a radical skeptic takes into consideration the fact that certainty is impossible, or certitude is impossible, and that they would say that because certitude doesn't exist, because you can never get to that position of certitude, that therefore you can't know anything, and you should be skeptical of everything. Even worse than that is people that would go so far as to say that because you can be wrong, you most likely are wrong. There are some people that do argue that way as well, is that just by virtue of the fact that you can be wrong about something, that therefore that you should just accept it as, probably wrong. Shouldn't put any eggs in that basket at all. And we can't function like this. We can't live our life like this, and nobody does. These questions that we have, these discussions, when we start talking about topics in epistemology, different theories of knowledge and theories of truth and theories of justification. These things are important to an epistemologist and people that have studied, people that want to really dive into this. But 99.9% of the population functions perfectly fine without having a epistemic framework or a theory of justification. Most animals out there, we would say that animals can know certain things, but trust me, an animal, like a dog, is not going to have deep thoughts about what does it mean to know that their food dish is full. So these conversations are entertaining, but they're not required for us to sort of walk around and start making knowledge claims about things. We do this all the time anyway, and that's where skepticism is like. Nobody needs to be a radical skeptic, and this is why reliabilism does work, is that just like, certain pragmatic theories do have functionality. That's what defines them as a pragmatic theory. They work, so let's use them.
Well, so are you saying that skepticism doesn't have a lot of relevance when you talk about theories of knowledge?
Well, I mean, there's a difference between radical skepticism and skepticism. It's like, yeah, it's always healthy to maintain a certain level of skepticism, but a certain level of skepticism doesn't mean you're skeptical about absolutely everything.
Well, I mean, and when you talk about skepticism, Barney put in a live chat, he referenced Pyrrhonian skepticism. So we talked a little bit about this before the stream. Academic skepticism would say that sensory impressions don't actually allow you to know anything. Your senses could be giving you false impressions, like the dreaming scenario. But Pyrrhonian skepticism would say that you keep doubting and inquiring every.
Yeah, we just blinked out.
Yeah, we just blinked out. I don't know what the hell just happened.
Yeah, we just blinked out. All right, we're back on. Mic check, mic check.
Yep, mine's working, I think.
Mic check, mic check. Oh, so we're still live.
Yep, mine's working, I think. Whose audio is playing?
That was me. I was playing my audio in the background. I didn't know this was live.
Oh, no, it's okay. I was just curious.
Yeah, so we're still on the screen. Who's John? Well, Jim is out. Is it just me and you? We're the last two?
I guess.
No, I'm here too.
So
we're not alone.
Are we on? Are we back online?
Yeah, we're back on. We're not back on for a couple of minutes though.
Okay.
We're about to just setting up the porn, but things you came back too fast. We're gonna do old school hangout style.
So where did we? Does anybody know where we left off at?
I think who was just speaking?
I was speaking before when it seemed to go out about academic skepticism and Pyrrhonian skepticism.
I thought somebody just made a point.
John was
saying
speaking
that,
about Pyrrhonian skepticism.
Yeah, there's a difference between radical skepticism and being skeptical.
Yeah. Williamson kind of describes it as skepticism is just the immune system of the rational mind, and the universal skepticism or radical skepticism is kind of an immune disease. What's it called? Autoimmune disease.
Autoimmune.
It is that immune system going completely overboard into uncharted territory and denying everything. The defeater for There are two major defeaters for skepticism in relation to knowledge. One is the one that I really like is from Chalmers. Well, there are multiple defeaters, including the original Descartes one of, well, I can imagine a God, and God is an infinite perfect being, and I am a fallible small being, and I couldn't be able to imagine a God if there was no God. Therefore, there is God, and God justifies everything else. Yay! Right. That was not the one that I was going with. The one that I really like is Chalmers, which kind of says, well, it doesn't matter. If universal skepticism is true, if solipsism is true, if those claims are true, it doesn't matter. Then your knowledge claims are not about that super reality which engulfs you as you are a brain in a vat or in the Matrix, but they do apply to the world as you perceive it. And that knowledge is about the regularities in that world. And in that sense, it is literally the same as discovering a new scientific theory, right? Where in the Matrix, you can say, I have hands and I see my hands and these are my hands and with these hands I can do this. And that's your knowledge about your hands. And then somebody could object, but you are in the Matrix. Those hands are just virtual. Those aren't real. You're just getting the signals from the Matrix that are telling you that you have hands, but you don't really have hands, right? And to you, that makes no difference. You have those virtual hands. Like if we discover that string theory is true, you will just find out that the hands that you know of are ultimately made out of strings, but nothing about your knowledge about your hands will change, right? You will just learn a new fact about them. So if we hypothetically are in a matrix and you find out that you're in a matrix, the thing that will change is that you will now know that your hands are objects within the matrix, but they will still be your hands. So in that sense, you can defeat skepticism by simply constraining yourself to your local reality, the things which actually affect you and are available to you. Another defeater for skepticism is if you are a skeptic of that sort, if you are a radical skeptic of that kind, then you don't know anything. Then you literally don't know anything. You can't even speculate about skepticism. You cannot propose what it means to be skeptical, because if you're a solipsist brain and everything that is in your head is just apparent to you, as you are that brain, and everything else is just figments of your imagination, then the laws of logic no longer constrain you, and reality no longer constrains you, and any way of reasoning about reality, including your conclusion that it is possible that you're a solipsist, that you are the only real thing, is flawed. It is unreasonable. So the moment that you decide that you're a solipsist, you no longer have the capacity to decide that you're a solipsist.
Well, so what you're saying is that form of skepticism, there's really no value in it because you can't go beyond it.
Yes, it is utterly. It is more than antithetical to pragmatism. It is antithetical to instrumentalism, right? I was just yesterday, I think, on Jay Pachic's show, and we were discussing actual existence and real existence and stuff that are merely apparent, and the difference between instrumentalism and pragmatism, where instrumentalism is those things which are available to you, the things that you can perceive and interact with and get a grasp on and kind of move about. And pragmatism is just a higher level of that, where you do that for a purpose, where you do that because it's useful to you, because it is pragmatically good to do that, right? So anything that is not instrumentalist is just unavailable to you. It's gone.
Wait a minute, what happened? I got two Barneys in here. And Nate's
Barneys are multiplying.
Oh boy, it's a Barney apocalypse.
That must have been Nate. I saw the other box in there, and I thought everybody was here, so I didn't bring that in. Nate must have dipped out and then tried to come back.
I guess so.
So, all right. So I guess the conclusion on skepticism is it's a nice place to visit, but you wouldn't want to live there.
So kind of in support of Socka, it depends on what you count as skepticism. If we're talking about questioning things, if we're talking about maintaining your epistemic uncertainty about things to a healthy level, then skepticism is a great thing to have, and it's literally the self-defense system of a reasonable mind. If you have an overactive skepticism that makes you reject everything and say stupid things because your disbelief is so great that you can no longer function as a reasonable being, then you can no longer function as a reasonable being. Stay away from that.
Well, it kind of seems like we're petering out here. I see. Okay, here's somebody back, and that is Socka back.
I think that maybe, sorry, if anybody has any questions from the audience, you know, like, I mean, we covered a lot of different things here, but yeah, I mean, we'll probably answer a couple questions if anybody have any, and then probably shut her down.
Yeah, and also, I'm trying to reach out to Nate. He must have dropped out, and then when he came back, I saw 6 people on the screen. And the way this screen is set up, there's 5 across underneath the broadcast window, and then any boxes that come in after that, they're 3/4 hidden by the taskbar at the bottom of the screen. So I didn't notice until a minute ago that there was 2 Barneys on the screen instead of Nate being here. But yeah, if anybody in the audience has any questions for the panel on the topic, there's something else going on in chat there that we don't necessarily want to field any questions on. That's for another day. But yeah, I would like to throw it to Immutable, though, since he brought this topic to us. You know, do you feel as if we addressed the issue fully here, Immutable? Was there anything else that you didn't feel? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think Socka, Barney, Jim did a great job of discussing the topic. It's been a really valuable conversation. I've learned from it. Yeah, thanks for coming on. This has been really interesting, and it's fun just to kind of have these conversations and explore different philosophical frameworks and kind of elucidate further on what they mean and things of that nature.
Yeah, I'm really pleased with the way the conversation went. It usually goes down some more and deeper rabbit holes, so I'm pleased.
So I guess let's start wrapping it up. I'm not really seeing any questions on the topic at hand in the live chat. So Immutable, you know, on top of your final words there, is there anything that you want to shill?
Nah, I'm good. Subscribe to A Raging Atheist. It's the reason that we're able to have great conversations like this. So yeah, if you want to see more of the content, subscribe.
And Barney, your final thoughts.
I've kind of given my final thoughts that knowledge as a concept is somewhat useless, as it is useful as a topic of conversation, but not as a concept to apply to oneself. What people, in my opinion, should be looking much more after is understanding.
And Jim, did you have anything additional to add?
No, I don't think I have anything additional to add. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope we have more of these kind of philosophically enlightened discussions in the future.
And don't you have something coming up tomorrow, Jim?
Yeah, tomorrow I have my very first I Must Ask You a Question, and I will be interviewing, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. His name is Ray. Oh man, that's going to really bother me. I don't remember his last name. Daniel Ray. He is the co-author of a book called The Cosmos, and it's a compilation of William Lane Craig and a bunch of other apologists that compiled this book together. And I've read the book, and I'll be interviewing him tomorrow on my channel at youtube.com/Jim Majors.
Well, and I say this completely tongue in cheek, and just to somehow throw my comic book guy impression in there, must ask you a question. Worst pun ever. But just joking, Joe.
No, there isn't one. There's totally no pun.
No pun at all. Okay.
No pun intended.
Socka Count, your final thoughts.
No, thanks for the conversation. I like these topics. Like it's fun because you're constantly learning new things, and when you talk about this stuff, again, people's different perspectives and views on it. And I love having discussions with all you guys, especially Barney. Don't want to dump anybody else, but if people think that I'm a contrarian, I think Barney is like so many levels above me. It's amazing. It was good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, Barney is the contrarian Yoda.
What the hell are you talking about? I agree with everybody.
Yeah, I'm going to be thinking long and hard tonight about how any appeal to authority is fallacious. I still haven't been able to wrap my head around that one, Barney. So,
oh, damn it! That disagreement, that rejection of your statement was not intentional. I really did not think it through.
No, you're all right. So, hey, I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to, as always, thank Nakasuchi for allowing me to do this. You can find me back here next Wednesday when we'll be talking about something. Not sure what yet. Maybe Immutable will suggest something again. But Saturday nights, you can find me on the Great Debate Community. Not sure what we're doing there this Saturday, but we'll be there doing something. I'm trying to talk Socka into joining us over there this Saturday, since he's, back home for a short time. And please make sure and get over to Jim Major's channel tomorrow night and catch his discussion with Mr. Ray. I think he said his name was last name.
Yeah,
right?
Daniel Ray.
Daniel Ray. As always, thanks to everybody for being here. I see Callan in the chat. Thank you for coming by. Messenger reveals. You came by. You and me got to talk, Messenger. I don't know why you're over here stirring shit. But anyway, Puffalopagus, thanks for being here. Jared Whitaker, Maynard Saves in the house. Up real quick, here's another super chat from, whoops, that's not it. That's Korg. Real quick, Maynard Saves, another $2 from Maynard Saves. He says, smoke weed every day. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. Smoke weed every day. Wish I could do it.
Weed every day.
So thank you all for coming by. Very interesting conversation. And as Nakasuchi says, be the conversation.